The giant meeting hall buzzed with strange sounds as creatures from across the galaxy gathered together. Admiral Kretak stood at the center, his bug-like body clicking and whistling as he spoke to the other aliens. His words came out through a machine that turned his sounds into words everyone could understand. "The humans are interesting but weak," he said, his many eyes looking around the room. "They have some clever ideas, but their weapons are simple. They use old rockets and basic shields, nothing we cannot handle easily." The other aliens nodded their heads or made whatever movements their species used to agree. General Voshar, who looked like a giant lizard, flicked his long tongue out and made a disgusted sound. "These humans fight each other all the time over things they could just make in their factories. They are too stupid to work together. How could they ever fight us?" The meeting hall was filled with different types of aliens. Some looked like insects, others like reptiles, and some were made of what seemed like living crystal. They all had one thing in common, though. They thought humans were weak and primitive. They had been watching Earth for 3 years, and everything they saw made them believe humans would be easy to defeat. What these aliens did not know was that far below the mountains of Colorado, humans were watching them right back. Colonel Jake Morrison sat in a dark room filled with computer screens and blinking lights. He had been a soldier for 20 years and had fought in wars all over Earth. Now he was in charge of keeping Earth safe from threats that came from space. "They think we are stupid," he said to Lieutenant Amy Foster, who stood next to him looking at the same information the aliens had. "That is exactly what we want them to think." Amy looked confused. "But sir, they have ships that are huge compared to ours. Their weapons can blow up whole planets. How can we fight that?" Jake smiled in a way that made Amy think of a wolf getting ready to hunt. "Amy, those aliens have been watching our wars, but they do not understand what they are seeing. They think our wars make us weak. They think fighting each other means we cannot work together." He pointed to one of the screens that showed information about human conflicts throughout history. "But every war we have ever fought has taught us something new. Every battle has made us better at surviving when things look hopeless. Every fight has shown us how to win when everyone thinks we should lose." The aliens in their meeting hall had no idea that humans had been preparing for this day for decades. While they thought humans were primitive, human scientists had been working on weapons and defenses the aliens had never even imagined. While they thought humans were divided, human leaders had been secretly planning how to work together if aliens ever came to Earth. Back in the alien meeting hall, the vote was simple and quick. Every alien leader agreed that Earth should belong to them. They would tell the humans to surrender and become slaves, or they would destroy the planet. It seemed like an easy choice for such a weak species. Admiral Kretak made the final announcement. "We will send our ships to the human world. We will give them one chance to surrender. If they refuse, we will show them what happens when primitive species dare to challenge the Galactic Council." The other aliens made sounds of agreement. Some chittered like insects, others hissed like snakes, and the crystal beings chimed like broken glass. They were all excited about adding another world to their empire. But Colonel Morrison was also making announcements in his underground base. "All stations prepare for Operation Human Persistence. Signal all our hidden bases around the world and in space. The aliens are coming, and it is time to show them what humans are really capable of." Around the world, things that looked like normal buildings, mines, and research stations began to change. Hidden panels opened to reveal weapons that no alien had ever seen before. Deep under the oceans, platforms that the aliens thought were for catching fish began rising to the surface with enough firepower to destroy small moons. The aliens had made their biggest mistake by thinking that humans were just another weak species that would give up when faced with superior technology. They had studied human weapons and found them lacking. They had watched human conflicts and seen them as signs of weakness. They had observed human technology and judged it primitive. What they had never done was study human history. If they had, they would have learned that humans had a special talent for winning fights they were supposed to lose. They would have discovered that humans got more dangerous the more hopeless things looked. They would have realized that the only thing more dangerous than a human who thinks he might lose is a human who knows he is going to lose but decides to fight. Anyway, as the alien ships prepared to leave their bases and travel to Earth, human ships that had been hiding in the darkness of space began moving into position. The aliens thought they were bringing overwhelming force to crush a primitive world. What they were actually doing was walking into the most carefully planned trap in the history of warfare. In his command center, Colonel Morrison watched the alien fleet begin its journey toward Earth. Amy, send a message to all human forces. Tell them the aliens are coming, and they think this will be easy. Let us prove them wrong. Lieutenant Foster began typing the message that would be sent to every human military unit on Earth and in space. As she typed, she asked, "Sir, what if we are wrong? What if they really are too powerful for us to fight?" Morrison looked at her with the same wolf-like smile. "Amy, there is something these aliens do not understand about humans. We do not fight because we think we can win. We fight because some things are worth fighting for, even if we lose. And sometimes that makes all the difference." The message went out across Earth and to all the hidden human bases in space. It was simple and short, but it carried the weight of everything humanity had learned about war, survival, and the refusal to give up when things seemed impossible. The aliens are coming. They think we are weak. They think we will surrender. They think they understand us. They are wrong. Show them what it means to be human. As alien ships filled with confidence and certainty began their journey to what they thought would be an easy conquest, human forces that had been preparing for this moment their entire lives began the final preparations for a war that would change everything. The aliens were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who refuses to admit he should lose. The alien ship was so big it blocked out half the stars when it appeared near Earth's moon. Captain Lisa Harper stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, looking up at the massive vessel through the main viewing screen. Her ship was one of the most advanced vessels humanity had ever built. But next to the alien dreadnought, it looked like a small boat next to an aircraft carrier. "Captain, we are getting a message from the alien ship," said Communications Officer Danny Chen. His voice was steady, but Lisa could see the tension in his shoulders. Everyone on the bridge knew this moment would decide the fate of humanity. "Put it on the main screen, Danny." The image that appeared made several crew members step backward. Admiral Kretik looked like something from a nightmare, with compound eyes that reflected the bridge lights and mandibles that clicked together when he spoke. When his words came through the translation system, they were cold and final. "Primitive humans, you will submit to the authority of the Galactic Council. Your species will serve as workers in our mining operations across the galaxy. This is not something we are asking you to do. This is something we are telling you to do." Captain Harper had been chosen for this moment because of her background. Before joining the space program, she had been a Marine who fought in 3 different wars on Earth. She knew exactly what the alien was really saying, and she knew how to respond. "Admiral Kretak," she said in a calm, clear voice. "On behalf of all humanity, I have a different idea. You have 30 minutes to leave our solar system before we decide your presence here means you want to fight us." The alien's translation machine seemed to have trouble with her words. Other species had always chosen to surrender when faced with the Council's power. The idea that a primitive species would threaten them was so strange that Kretak thought his machine was broken. "Human, you do not understand what you are dealing with. We have weapons that can break your planet apart. Our shields can stop your nuclear bombs. You have no choice but to do what we say." Lisa smiled, and something in that smile made the alien pause. Even through the translation system and across the vast difference between their species, Kretak could sense something dangerous in that expression. "Admiral, you have studied our weapons and our technology, but you made one very big mistake in all your watching and learning." "What mistake is that, primitive creature? You never studied our history." She cut off the transmission and turned to her crew. "All stations, prepare for battle. Send a signal to Earth Command. Operation Human Persistence is now active." Across the solar system, things began happening that the aliens had never seen before. Hidden bases that had been disguised as asteroid mining operations powered up weapon systems. Deep space observation posts that looked like simple research stations revealed themselves to be heavily armed military installations. Even some of the commercial shipping vessels traveling between Earth and Mars began broadcasting military identification codes. On Earth, President Catherine Moore stood in the Emergency Command Center beneath Washington. She had been a small-town mayor just 5 years ago, but the alien threat had changed everything. Now she was responsible for coordinating humanity's response to its first interstellar war. "Madam President," said Admiral Roy Peterson, "our deep space sensors show the alien fleet maintaining standard defensive positions. They are following exactly the same pattern our simulations predicted they would use." "Good," Moore replied. "That means they still think we are primitive. Execute Phase 1. What the aliens saw next would have been impossible for them to understand, even if they had been watching for it. All across Earth, installations that looked like mining operations, scientific research stations, and deep-sea exploration platforms revealed their true purpose. The aliens had studied human nuclear weapons and decided they were not powerful enough to get through Council shields. What they had not realized was that humans had moved far beyond nuclear weapons. The first antimatter warheads did not launch toward the alien ships. Instead, they targeted specific empty points in space around the alien fleet. When they exploded, they created fields of exotic matter that began interfering with the aliens' ability to escape into hyperspace. Admiral Kretak watched in confusion as his escape routes were systematically cut off. What is happening? Our sensors show no weapons platforms in those areas. His tactical officer, a younger Vexithani named Sliktar, made nervous, chittering sounds. Admiral, the humans appear to have created artificial gravity wells using some kind of exotic matter we have never seen before. Our hyperspace engines cannot work within these fields. For the first time in his long military career, Kretak felt something he had never experienced in battle: fear. Back on the bridge of the UES Defiance, Captain Harper opened a new communication channel to the alien fleet. When Admiral Kretak's image appeared again, she could see the confusion and growing panic in his compound eyes. Admiral, I believe you wanted to discuss terms of surrender. Impossible. You are a primitive species. You should not have weapons like this. You keep using that word, primitive. I do not think it means what you think it means. You see, Admiral, while you were watching our surface conflicts and deciding we were weak, you missed the most important thing about human military thinking. She paused, letting her words sink in. Around the alien fleet, more exotic matter explosions created an ever-tightening cage that made escape impossible. We learned long ago that the next war would not be fought on battlefields like the old wars. It would be fought in space, between worlds, using weapons and tactics that had never been used before. So while you were studying our old weapons and our old ways of fighting, we were developing new ones. The alien fleet was now completely trapped, unable to escape into hyperspace and unable to advance toward Earth without running into the exotic matter fields. For the first time in the history of the Galactic Council, a primitive species had outmaneuvered their military forces. This is not possible, Kretak whispered. No species has ever defeated the Council's technology. Admiral, you made the same mistake that every bully makes. You thought that being bigger and having better weapons automatically meant you would win, but you forgot to ask the most important question. What question? Captain Harper's smile became predatory. You forgot to ask what humans do when someone tries to make us slaves. The answer to that question was about to reshape everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare, technology, and the species called humanity. General Marcus Webb stood in the war room deep beneath the city of Geneva, watching screens that showed information from all over the world. Reports were coming in so fast that the computers could barely keep up. The alien fleet was trapped above Earth, unable to escape. But Webb knew this was just the beginning. Sir, the Australian mining operation reports ready for Phase 2, called out Intelligence Officer Rachel Kim. The Sahara installations are online, and the Pacific deep-sea platforms have reached full power. Webb nodded grimly. The aliens had been watching humanity's wars for years, but they had completely missed the most important change in human military thinking. They thought the next war would be fought with ships and guns just like the old wars. They had no idea that humans had been preparing to fight in the empty spaces between planets. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Zhang was studying the tactical display that showed the alien fleet's positions. The alien ships are maintaining standard defensive formation, sir. Their shields are set up to stop energy weapons and kinetic projectiles, just like our computer models predicted they would be. Perfect, Webb replied. Execute Phase 2. All across Earth, installations that had looked like normal mining operations, research stations, and underwater exploration platforms showed their real purpose. The aliens had studied human nuclear weapons and decided they were too weak to get through Council technology. What they had not realized was that humans had moved far beyond nuclear weapons decades ago. The first antimatter warheads that launched from hidden silos around the world were not aimed at the alien ships themselves. Instead, they were targeted at specific points in empty space around the alien fleet. When they exploded, they created a three-dimensional cage of exotic matter that began interfering with the aliens' hyperspace drives and making it impossible for them to escape. Admiral Kretak stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching in growing panic as his fleet's escape routes disappeared one by one. What kind of trickery is this? Our sensors show no weapons platforms at those coordinates. His tactical officer, Slicktar, was making the rapid clicking sounds that his species used when they were nervous. Admiral, the humans appear to have created artificial gravity wells using some form of exotic matter manipulation that our databases have no record of. Our hyperspace engines cannot function within these interference fields. For the first time since he had joined the Galactic Council's military forces, Admiral Kretak felt something he had never experienced in battle: complete uncertainty about the outcome. On the bridge of the UES Defiance, Captain Lisa Harper opened a new communication channel to the alien fleet. Admiral Kretak, I believe you wanted to discuss the terms of your surrender. The alien's mandibles clicked rapidly as he tried to process what was happening. This is impossible. You are supposed to be a primitive species. You should not possess weapons technology of this sophistication. You keep calling us primitive, Admiral, but I think you need to understand what that word really means. While you were busy watching our surface conflicts and deciding we were too weak to be a threat, you missed the most important development in human military strategy. Captain Harper paused, knowing that her words were being recorded and would be studied by alien military analysts across the galaxy. We realized long ago that the next major war would not be fought on planetary surfaces like our historical conflicts. It would be fought in space, using weapons and tactics that had never been tested in actual combat. So while you were studying our old nuclear weapons and our conventional military doctrine, we were secretly developing entirely new forms of warfare. The exotic matter fields continued to expand around the alien fleet, creating an ever-tightening prison that made escape impossible and advance toward Earth equally impossible. The aliens found themselves trapped in a situation their military training had never prepared them for. But the exotic matter cage was only the beginning of humanity's surprise. Deep beneath the Sahara Desert, Dr. Elena Vasquez was monitoring the approaching alien fleet from her secret laboratory. As Earth's leading expert in xenobiology, she had spent the last 5 years preparing for exactly this moment. Initiating biological warfare. Protocols, she announced to her team of scientists and military specialists. Are you certain about this approach, Doctor? Asked her assistant, Dr. Kevin Park. We are literally attempting to give alien spaceships a virus. Dr. Vasquez smiled in a way that reminded everyone in the laboratory why she had been chosen to lead this particular project. Not their spaceships, Kevin. Remember, their ships are alive. Bioorganic technology means they are vulnerable to biological warfare in ways they never anticipated because no other species has ever tried. The second wave of human weapons was unlike anything that had ever been used in galactic warfare. Microscopic capsules containing specially engineered pathogens began spreading through space, targeting the living hulls of the alien ships. These pathogens had been designed based on biological samples that humanity had secretly collected from the aliens' own observation probes over the past 3 years. Within hours, the alien fleet began experiencing system failures as their ships literally became sick. Weapon systems that relied on biological neural networks began firing at random targets. Life support systems started producing poisonous gases instead of breathable atmosphere. Navigation systems began giving conflicting directions that sent ships spinning out of control. General Voss Har, the reptilian Sarek commander who had taken over fleet operations when Admiral Kretak became too confused to continue, watched in horror as his flagship's walls began developing what could only be described as a disease. Strange growths appeared on the bioorganic surfaces, and the ship's living systems began behaving in ways that defied all logic. This cannot be happening, he hissed to his bridge crew. No species in the history of the galaxy has ever developed weapons that could affect our biotechnology in this manner. Captain Harper's voice came over the communication system again, and now there was something almost educational in her tone, as if she were teaching a lesson to students who were having trouble understanding the subject. General Vossahar, you made exactly the same mistake as Admiral Kretak. You assumed that because we had not developed bioorganic technology ourselves, we could not fight effectively against it. But humans have been fighting biological warfare for thousands of years. We have had millennia to perfect our understanding of how to use diseases as weapons. The alien fleet, trapped by exotic matter fields and now being systematically disabled by biological weapons they had never imagined could exist, found themselves facing a truth that would completely change how the galaxy thought about warfare. Humans did not fight fair, and that made them the most dangerous species anyone had ever encountered. Emergency Counselor Zephyra appeared as a shimmering hologram aboard what remained of the Sauroch flagship. The Ashkari were beings of pure energy who rarely got involved in actual fighting, preferring to control galactic politics from behind the scenes. Her appearance meant the situation had become far more serious than anyone in the Galactic Council had expected. General Vossahar, her voice created harmonics that could drive weaker species insane, explained to me how a primitive world has neutralized 2/3 of our assault fleet. Vossahar, whose scales now showed the stress patterns that indicated extreme fear in his species, struggled to find words that would make sense. Counselor, these humans fight unlike any species we have ever encountered. They do not follow standard combat doctrine. They do not use weapons we recognize. They seem to treat warfare as some kind of creative art form rather than a military science. The reptilian general was not exaggerating. Human tactics were so far outside normal galactic military thinking that the aliens' tactical computers could not even analyze them properly. Where other species followed predictable patterns based on thousands of years of established military tradition, humans seemed to make up new strategies in the middle of battle. On Earth, President Catherine Moore stood before the emergency session of the United Earth Council. The woman who had been managing a small town's budget just 5 years earlier now found herself coordinating humanity's first war against aliens from outer space. Ladies and gentlemen, she addressed the assembled leaders of every nation on Earth. Our military advisors inform me that the alien advance fleet is in full retreat. However, our intelligence network suggests this was merely a reconnaissance force testing our defenses. Admiral Roy Peterson, the veteran military commander who had spent his entire career preparing for threats that most people thought would never come, stepped forward with new information. Madam President, our deep space monitoring stations have detected massive hyperspace signatures approaching from the edge of our solar system. The aliens are bringing what appears to be their main battle fleet. How much time do we have to prepare? 72 hours, ma'am. President Moore looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders, representatives from every continent, every major nation, every significant military and scientific organization. They had just proven that humans could defeat an alien scouting force, but what was approaching next would test every aspect of human ingenuity, determination, and the stubborn refusal to give up that had carried their species through every major crisis in their history. Admiral Peterson, activate Operation Last Stand. Send signals to all colonies, all research stations, all mining operations throughout the solar system. If these aliens want to see what humans are truly capable of in a real war, then let us give them an education they will never forget. In the depths of space far beyond the orbit of Pluto, the largest military fleet in the history of the galaxy began its final approach toward the small blue world that had committed the unthinkable crime of refusing to surrender. The Galactic Council had decided that humanity needed to be made an example of, to show every other primitive species in the galaxy what happened when they dared to resist the natural order of things. They still did not understand that making an example of humanity was probably the worst decision they could have possibly made. The main Council battle fleet was a sight that had terrified countless worlds into immediate surrender. Thousands of ships of every size and design, from small fighters to massive dreadnoughts capable of destroying entire moons. At the center of this armada hung the crown jewel of Council military technology, the superweapon known as World Killer, a ship so large that it had its own artificial gravity and could sterilize entire planets with a single shot. But as impressive as this fleet was, the aliens were still making the same fundamental error that had doomed their advance forces. They were preparing to fight the last war, not the next one. They expected humans to meet them in traditional space combat, ship against ship, using conventional weapons and accepted military tactics. What they got instead was something that would redefine warfare throughout the galaxy. The first sign that this battle would be different came when the alien fleet's sensors detected movement in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. What had appeared to be a normal collection of space rocks and mining operations suddenly revealed itself to be the largest military installation humanity had ever constructed. Commander Steve Garcia had been an asteroid miner for 15 years before the alien threat changed everything. Now he commanded a fleet of converted mining ships, research vessels, and improvised weapons platforms hidden throughout the asteroid belt. His flagship was a converted mining vessel called Stubborn Mule, armed with mining charges converted into weapons and equipped with engines that could make it accelerate in ways that violated every known law of space combat. "Attention alien fleet," he broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Commander Garcia of the Asteroid Mining Collective. You are trespassing in human space. Leave now, or we will show you what humans do to claim jumpers who try to steal our territory." The response from thousands of converted mining ships, research stations, and hidden military platforms throughout the asteroid belt was immediate and devastating. But it was not the firepower that shocked the aliens most. It was the tactics. Humans did not fight like a traditional space navy. They fought like pirates, guerrillas, and desperate colonists protecting their homes from invaders. Ships would dart out from behind asteroids, fire everything they had, then disappear back into the debris field before the aliens could target them. Mining charges converted into improvised explosive devices turned chunks of space rock into kinetic weapons that no shield technology could completely stop. "They are everywhere," chittered a Vexthani sensor operator aboard the World Killer. "Our tactical computers cannot predict their movement patterns because they have no standardized formations or recognized doctrine." Captain Nina Torres, commanding the converted research vessel Crazy Ivan, demonstrated exactly what the alien sensor operator meant. Using her ship's experimental gravity manipulation drive, she literally picked up asteroids and threw them at enemy vessels while flying in patterns that should have been impossible for any trained military pilot to execute. Yee-haw. She whooped over the communication channels as her impossible maneuver sent 3 alien destroyers tumbling into each other in a collision that destroyed all 3 ships. Who wants some more of that good old-fashioned human unpredictability? Supreme Commander Thexara stood in the command center of the World Killer, her crystalline form pulsing with colors that indicated extreme frustration. The Nexari were a species that valued order, precision, and predictable outcomes. What she was witnessing in the battle around Earth was the complete opposite of everything her military training had taught her was possible. "Status report," she demanded, her voice creating harmonic frequencies that resonated through the ship's structure. "Supreme Commander," her tactical officer replied nervously, "we have lost 37% of our fleet strength. The humans are employing tactics that our databases have no information about. They appear to be making up new strategies during the actual combat." Thexara's form shifted to colors that her species used to express disbelief. "That is impossible. Military doctrine requires years of planning, training, and coordination. No species can simply improvise effective tactics in real time." But that was exactly what humans were doing. Throughout the asteroid belt, converted mining ships and improvised weapons platforms were engaging the most powerful military fleet in galactic history, using tactics that had never been seen before. Where alien military thinking demanded rigid formations and predictable strategies, humans were treating space combat like a chaotic free-for-all, where anything that worked was fair game. Commander Garcia's voice crackled over the communication channels as his mining ship Stubborn Mule executed another impossible maneuver. "All human forces, remember what we learned from our own history. When you are outnumbered and outgunned, you do not fight fair. You fight smart, you fight dirty, and you fight like your life depends on it. Because it does." The aliens were learning that human primitive tactics were actually incredibly sophisticated in ways they had never considered. Human ships would work together in small groups, then split apart and regroup in different combinations. They used the asteroids not just as cover, but as weapons, tools, and even temporary bases. Most confusing of all, they seemed to be able to communicate and coordinate without using the standard military communication protocols that alien fleets relied on. Dr. Elena Vasquez, monitoring the battle from her laboratory on Earth, was amazed at how well the biological weapons were working. "The alien bioships are showing signs of complete system breakdown," she reported to General Webb. "Their living hulls are not just getting sick, they are getting confused. The ships are starting to behave like animals that do not know where they are or what they are supposed to be doing." This was the result of another uniquely human approach to warfare. Where other species developed weapons designed to destroy enemy ships quickly, humans had developed weapons designed to make enemy ships unreliable. A ship that was completely destroyed could be replaced, but a ship that might work correctly or might suddenly start firing at its own. Allies created problems that were much harder to solve. The psychological effect on the alien crews was even more devastating than the physical damage to their ships. Soldiers from species that valued order and predictability found themselves in a situation where nothing made sense, and everything they had been trained to expect was wrong. Supreme Commander. Thexara made a decision that she would regret for the rest of her very long life. Prepare the consciousness disruptor. If we cannot defeat their ships with conventional weapons, we will break their minds. The consciousness disruptor was the Galactic Council's ultimate weapon, a device that attacked the neural patterns of entire populations. It had never failed to reduce a species to helpless insanity, making them easy to conquer and control. The weapon required enormous amounts of power and took several hours to charge. But once fired, it could affect every thinking being on an entire planet. On Earth, Dr. Maria Santos was the head of the Human Consciousness Research Institute, an organization that most people thought studied psychology and mental health. In reality, it was humanity's defense against exactly this kind of attack. Dr. Santos had been monitoring the alien weapon systems and had been expecting this. Development, Doctor, her assistant, Dr. Alex Wong, called out with barely controlled panic. The weapon is at full charge. Impact in 60 seconds. Dr. Santos smiled in a way that would have terrified anyone who did not know her well. Alex, do you remember what makes humans different from every other species the aliens have encountered? Our refusal to give up even when we should? That is part of it. But the real difference is that we are already completely insane by galactic standards. We are the species that invented reality television, social media, and pineapple on pizza. We have been driving ourselves crazy for entertainment for thousands of years. The consciousness disruptor fired, sending a psychic wave designed to shatter sanity, washing over Earth's entire population. For a moment that seemed to last forever, the aliens waited for the screams of madness that would signal the collapse of human civilization. Instead, they heard laughter. President Moore's voice came over the communication channels, and there was genuine amusement in her tone. Is that the best you can do? You want to drive us insane? Have you actually looked at our history? We are the species that thought it would be fun to strap ourselves to rockets and fire ourselves into space. We are the people who invented extreme sports, horror movies, and hot sauce competitions. We have been driving ourselves crazy for fun since before we invented writing. Across Earth, humans were not only unaffected by the weapon that was designed to destroy minds, but many people actually reported feeling more focused and determined than they had before the attack. The chaotic, creative, gloriously irrational human mind that the aliens saw as a sign of primitiveness was actually humanity's greatest defense against mental attacks. The human brain, shaped by millions of years of evolution on a planet where survival required constant adaptation to changing conditions, was simply too flexible and resilient to be broken by a weapon designed to work on more orderly alien minds. Commander Garcia's voice came over the fleet communications, and now there was a note of genuine excitement in it. Well, that was refreshing. I feel like I just had the best cup of coffee in my life. Now, are you aliens ready to see what humans can do when we are really motivated? The failure of the consciousness disruptor sent waves of panic through the alien fleet that were almost as devastating as any physical weapon could have been. Supreme Commander. Thexara stared at her tactical displays in complete disbelief as report after report came in from her ship commanders. Supreme Commander, her communications officer reported with barely controlled terror. The humans are not just unaffected by the psychic attack. They appear to be energized by it. Their attack patterns are becoming more aggressive and coordinated. This was exactly what was happening. Across the human fleet, commanders who had been holding back their most dangerous weapons and tactics were now unleashing everything they had developed for this moment. The alien psychic attack had been intended to break human resistance, but instead it had removed the last psychological barriers that had been keeping humans from fighting with absolute ruthlessness. Commander Steve Garcia felt the change immediately. Where before he had been fighting defensively, trying to protect human territory and minimize losses, now he felt a cold anger that focused his mind like a laser beam. All asteroid mining vessels, switch to pattern Omega. It is time to show these aliens what humans learned from our insect species. Pattern Omega was a combat formation that human military scientists had developed by studying swarm insects like bees and ants. Instead of trying to match the aliens ship for ship in traditional combat, human vessels would attack in coordinated swarms that could overwhelm enemy defenses through sheer numbers and unpredictability. The asteroid belt suddenly came alive with movement as thousands of converted mining ships, research vessels, and improvised weapons platforms began moving in patterns that seemed chaotic, but were actually precisely coordinated. Small groups of ships would dart in to attack single alien vessels, then retreat before the enemy could respond effectively. As soon as the aliens adjusted their defenses to counter these small group attacks, larger formations would strike from different directions. Captain Nina Torres had switched from her experimental research vessel to commanding a squadron of mining ships that had been converted into improvised fighters. "Listen up, people," she broadcast to her pilots. "These aliens think space combat is like chess, all careful moves and planned strategies. Let us show them that humans prefer to play poker, where bluffing and unpredictability beat careful planning every time." Her squadron demonstrated this philosophy by appearing to retreat from an alien cruiser, drawing its escort fighters into pursuit, then leading them directly into an asteroid field where hidden human weapons platforms had been waiting in ambush. The alien fighters, designed for open space combat, were completely helpless in the confined space between asteroids where human ships could maneuver easily. The psychological effect on the alien fleet was becoming as important as the physical damage. Species that had conquered dozens of worlds using overwhelming technological superiority were discovering that their standard tactics were useless against enemies who refused to follow any recognizable patterns. "They fight like mad creatures," reported one Sarok captain to Supreme Commander Thexara. "Our tactical computers cannot predict their movements because they have no consistent strategy. They seem to change their entire approach to combat every few minutes." What the aliens did not understand was that this apparent chaos was actually a sophisticated form of military organization that humans had learned from their own history. Every major human military force had developed the ability to adapt tactics in real time based on changing battlefield conditions. What looked like random chaos to alien observers was actually thousands of small unit commanders making independent decisions that somehow worked together to create larger strategic effects. Dr. Elena Vasquez was monitoring the biological warfare effects from her Earth-based laboratory, and what she was seeing exceeded even her most optimistic projections. "The alien bioships are not just malfunctioning," she reported to General Webb. "They are starting to attack each other. The biological weapons are making their neural networks so confused that they cannot tell friend from enemy." This was creating a cascade effect throughout the alien fleet. Ships that should have been supporting each other were instead firing on their own allies. Communication systems that relied on biological components were sending contradictory orders. Navigation systems were directing ships into collision courses with their own forces. Supreme Commander Thexara watched her perfectly organized fleet dissolve into chaos as thousands of improvised human vessels swarmed around them like angry insects. Her species valued order, precision, and predictable outcomes. What she was experiencing was the exact opposite of everything her military training had taught her was possible. "All ships," she ordered desperately, "fall back to defensive formation. Concentrate all firepower on the largest human vessels." But human tactics made even this simple order impossible to follow. There were no large human vessels to concentrate fire on. The human fleet consisted of thousands of small ships that worked together in constantly changing patterns. Destroying a few dozen of them had no more effect on their overall combat effectiveness than swatting a few bees would have on an entire hive. Commander Garcia had anticipated this exact response. "All mining ships execute dispersal pattern 7. Make them chase shadows while the real attack comes from where they are not looking." The human ships scattered in all directions, presenting the aliens with hundreds of different targets moving in unpredictable patterns. While the alien gunners tried to track and destroy the fast-moving human vessels, hidden weapons platforms throughout the asteroid belt began a concentrated bombardment of the alien command ships. The aliens were learning a lesson that humans had figured out thousands of years ago during their tribal warfare period. Sometimes quantity has a quality all its own. No matter how advanced individual alien ships were, they could not be everywhere at once. Human forces could attack from every direction simultaneously, forcing the aliens to spread their defenses so thin that they became ineffective everywhere. Captain Torres led her squadron in a daring attack on one of the alien supply ships, using mining charges to blast through the vessel's hull and disable its engines. Yeehaw, another claim jumper bites the dust. Who wants to go claim jumping with me next? Her enthusiasm was infectious, spreading through the human fleet like wildfire, where alien crews were becoming demoralized by the chaos and unpredictability of the battle. Human crews were getting more excited and aggressive with each successful attack. The aliens were about to learn that when humans said they were going to fight a war, they meant they were going to enjoy it. The battle had been raging for 18 hours when Supreme Commander Thexara made a decision that would echo through galactic history for thousands of years. Faced with losses that were not just strategically unacceptable, but completely unprecedented, she decided to use the one weapon that had never failed the Galactic Council. "Charge the planetary destruction array," she commanded, her crystalline form now pulsing with colors that indicated absolute desperation. "If we cannot defeat their fleets, we will eliminate their world." The planetary destruction array was mounted on the world killer itself, a weapon so powerful that it could crack a planet's crust and render an entire world uninhabitable within hours. It had been used only 3 times in galactic history, and each time it had ended resistance from primitive species immediately. The weapon required enormous amounts of power and took several hours to charge. But once fired, it would make the question of human military tactics irrelevant. There would be no humans left to fight. On Earth, President Catherine Moore received the news in the Emergency Command Center beneath Washington. The woman who had started this crisis as a small-town mayor now faced the possibility that her decisions would result in the extinction of the human species. "Madam President," Admiral Peterson reported grimly, "our deep space sensors confirm that the alien superweapon is charging. Impact in approximately 4 hours." Moore looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders. Some showed fear, others showed determination, but all of them showed the same fundamental human quality that had brought them to this point, the refusal to give up even when defeat seemed certain. "Admiral, how many of our people are still fighting in the asteroid belt?" "Approximately 40,000 personnel across all platforms and vessels, ma'am." "Send them a message. Tell them what the aliens are planning. Give them the choice to evacuate to the outer system or to continue fighting." The message that went out to the human forces was simple and direct. "The aliens are preparing to destroy Earth. You have 4 hours to decide whether to retreat to safety or to stay and fight for our home. No one will think less of you for choosing to survive." The response came back within minutes, and it was the same from every ship, every platform, every crew throughout the asteroid belt. "We stay, we fight. If Earth dies, we die with it. But we will take as many of these alien bastards with us as we can." Commander Garcia's voice came over the fleet communications with something that sounded almost like joy. "All right, people, you heard the news. We have 4 hours to show these aliens what humans do when someone threatens our home. Let us make these 4 hours count." What happened next would become legendary throughout human space. Knowing that their world was doomed unless they could stop the world killer, human forces launched the most desperate and creative attack in the history of warfare. Captain Nina Torres led a squadron of mining ships in a direct assault on the world killer's weapon systems. Her ships were tiny compared to the massive alien dreadnought, but they had one advantage the aliens had not considered. They were designed to work in the dangerous environment of asteroid mining, where quick thinking and precise maneuvering meant the difference between life and death. "Remember, people," she broadcast to her pilots, "we are not trying to destroy this thing. We just need to damage it enough to stop that planet killer weapon, hit the power conduits, the sensor arrays, anything that looks important." Her ships darted between the world killer's defensive weapons like hummingbirds attacking a giant. Too small and fast for the massive ship's systems to target effectively, mining charges designed to crack asteroids proved remarkably effective at damaging alien ship systems when placed precisely. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been monitoring the biological warfare effects throughout the battle, and she had noticed something interesting about the world killer itself. "General Webb," she called from her laboratory, "the world killer is not just a ship with biological components. The entire vessel is essentially a single massive living organism. If I can introduce the right pathogen into its life support systems, do it." Webb replied without hesitation. What Dr. Vasquez had discovered was that the World Killer's incredible size was also its greatest weakness. The massive bioship required an enormous circulatory system to keep all of its living components healthy, and that circulatory system could carry more than just nutrients and oxygen. A single human fighter, piloted by Lieutenant Mike Davidson, managed to penetrate the World Killer's hull and release Dr. Vasquez's specially designed pathogen directly into the ship's biological systems. Within minutes, the massive vessel began experiencing system failures throughout its entire structure. "Supreme Commander," reported the World Killer's medical officer with barely controlled panic, "the ship is experiencing massive biological contamination. All organic systems are showing signs of critical infection." Thexara watched in horror as her ultimate weapon began dying around her. The planetary destruction array lost power as the biological systems that supported it became too sick to function. Life support systems throughout the ship began producing toxic gases instead of breathable atmosphere. Even the ship's navigation systems became confused as the biological neural networks that controlled them were affected by the spreading infection. But perhaps most shocking of all was the human response to their apparent victory. Instead of celebrating or demanding surrender, Commander Garcia's voice came over the communication channels with an offer that stunned every alien in the fleet. "Attention, World Killer. This is Commander Garcia. Your ship is dying and your weapon is dead. We can provide medical assistance to help your crew survive, but only if you surrender immediately and agree to leave our solar system." The idea that the humans would offer to help, the same aliens who had just tried to destroy their world, was so alien to galactic thinking that many of the alien crew members thought it was some kind of trick or trap. Supreme Commander Thexara, watching her flagship die around her and facing the complete destruction of the most powerful fleet in galactic history, finally understood what made humans so dangerous. They were not just willing to fight to the death to defend their homes. They were also willing to show mercy to enemies who had tried to destroy them. That combination of absolute ruthlessness in battle and surprising compassion in victory was something no other species in the galaxy had ever encountered. Supreme Commander Thexara stood in what remained of the World Killer's command center, her crystalline form cracked and flickering with weak light. Around her, the ruins of the greatest military fleet in galactic history drifted through human space as debris and disabled hulks. The few ships that were still functional were limping toward the edge of the solar system under human escort. "Impossible," she whispered to herself, the word creating harmonics that resonated through the dying ship's structure. "We had superior technology, superior numbers, superior strategic position. How did a primitive species defeat the combined might of the Galactic Council?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Admiral Kretak, who had survived the destruction of his command ship and was now a prisoner aboard the human vessel Unconquerable Spirit, had been allowed to witness the final stages of the battle. Captain Danny Brooks, the former cargo pilot who now commanded one of humanity's most effective warships, had thought the alien admiral should understand what had really happened. "You want to know how we won?" Brooks asked, settling into a chair across from the insectoid alien. "You made the same mistake that every bully in history has made. You assumed that being bigger and stronger automatically meant you would win." Kretak's compound eyes focused on the human with something that might have been curiosity. "Your species defies all logical military analysis. Your tactics made no sense according to accepted doctrine. Your weapons were inferior to ours. Your ships were improvised and primitive. By every measure we understand, you should have lost." Captain Brooks smiled, and there was no mockery in the expression, just a kind of patient understanding. "That is where you are wrong, Admiral. Our weapons were not inferior to yours, they were unexpected. Our ships were not primitive, they were adapted to do jobs your ships were never designed for. Our tactics did not make no sense, they made perfect sense if you understood human nature." He gestured toward the viewing screen, which showed the asteroid belt where thousands of human vessels were now engaged in rescue operations, pulling alien survivors from disabled ships and providing medical aid to species that had been trying to kill them just hours before. "You see, Admiral, you studied our technology and our military capabilities, but you never studied our history. If you had, you would have learned the most important thing about humans. We are at our most dangerous when we have something to protect." On Earth, President Catherine Moore stood before the emergency session of the reformed Galactic Council, now meeting in human territory under very different circumstances than anyone had expected. The alien dignitaries who had once viewed humanity as primitive laborers now looked at her with expressions that ranged from awe to outright terror. The great meeting hall was much quieter now than it had been during that first session where the aliens had decided to conquer Earth. Many of the original council members had not survived the war, and those who remained were still trying to understand how their perfect military machine had been completely destroyed by a species they had dismissed as harmless. "The war is over," President Moore declared, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems that rendered her words into dozens of different alien languages. "But let me be very clear about what happens next. Humanity will take its place in galactic society, but as equals, not as subjects. We will share our technology, our knowledge, and our perspective with all species who approach us in peace. In return, the Council will respect the sovereignty of all species, not just the powerful ones." Council Leader Vexmani, one of the few original Council members to survive the destruction of the fleet, spoke carefully. "And if we refuse to accept these terms?" President Moore's smile was gentle, but there was something in her eyes that made every alien in the room remember exactly how the war had ended. "Then you will discover that this recent conflict was just us being polite. You really do not want to see what humans are like when we are actually angry." The months that followed would reshape galactic civilization in ways that no one had anticipated. Humanity did not just join the galactic community, they revolutionized it completely. Human unpredictability became the new foundation for military doctrine throughout the galaxy. Human creativity became the driving force behind technological advancement that had been stagnant for centuries. Human stubbornness became the basis for a new philosophy of never accepting defeat. Even when logic suggested that victory was impossible, trade routes that had been controlled by council species for thousands of years were open to competition. Worlds that had been forced to serve as resource colonies were given the option to govern themselves. Scientific research that had been restricted to maintain technological advantages was shared freely among all species. But perhaps most importantly, the galaxy learned a new way of thinking about conflict and cooperation. Where the old council had maintained order through fear and overwhelming force, the new galactic community that emerged was based on mutual respect and the understanding that every species had something valuable to contribute. Admiral Kretak, who had been allowed to return to his homeworld after the war, found himself studying human history with an intensity that bordered on obsession. What he discovered fascinated him more than any military campaign he had ever analyzed. They have been preparing for this war for their entire evolutionary history, he reported, to what remained of the Vexthani military command. Every conflict they ever fought taught them something new about survival against impossible odds. Every defeat made them more determined to find ways to win the next time. Every victory showed them that there was no enemy too powerful to be beaten if you were willing to fight smart instead of fighting fair. Throughout the galaxy, a new saying began to emerge among the various species, passed down from the survivors of the greatest military disaster in galactic history. Thinking of war with humans? Better have courage, not luck. Because humans do not believe in luck. They make their own. The age of human space had begun, not with exploration or colonization, but with the simple recognition that sometimes the most dangerous species in the galaxy is the one that refuses to admit it should lose. And in a universe full of ancient civilizations that had grown comfortable with their power and certain of their superiority, that refusal to accept defeat was exactly what had been needed to shake things up. As Captain Brooks had told Admiral Kretak during those final hours of the war, humans were at their most dangerous when they had something to protect. Now they had an entire galaxy to protect, and every species in it was slowly beginning to understand what that meant. The galaxy would never be the same, and for the first time in millennia, that was exactly what it needed.